Hi, we're Maddie and Nico, and we are turning this empty cargo van into this tiny home on wheels. We have no building experience, but we'll take you along each step as we transform our 2020 Ford Transit van. In this video, we're building our upper cabinets, part 1. So for our van dimensions, we decided for the upper cabinets that we would do probably about 13 by 13 inches. I just saw this good little drawing by Van Life Ergonomics, so it just kind of lets you know what's more comfortable to have, so that way you're not hitting your head. It's all very general though. You're gonna want to plan out your van based off yourself. If you're building your own van, you may as well customize it. Like our counter is gonna be a bit taller because Nico's 6 foot and I'm 5'7", so we're both tall enough that a higher countertop seems nice. But then with that, we want to make sure we're not having our lower cabinets and our upper cabinets too close to each other. And we're gonna have at least 20 inches in between the two. And then we also just want our upper cabinets to be at least 9 inches in from the edge of our lower cabinets. So we have 9 inches of space to not hit our heads on the upper cabinets while we're doing dishes or cooking or something like that. All right, so now we're gonna template. So we're gonna get cardboard and we're going to scribe the shape of the top of the ceiling here. I kind of just put a finger like right above the pencil, like so, and then I start here. Do the same with another piece on this side. Pretty damn straight to me. So what we're doing is we put this piece up, and there's our side piece.
So now Maddie's lining up the lines we drew on this piece so it matches the curve, and we're going to transfer it onto this bigger piece so it's one.
One thing that happens since our wall here is sloped is the front of this cabinet slopes downward. Like, it's not gonna be perfect because we're in a van and everything's kind of slanted, but it'd be nicer to have this be a bit more straight relative to the floor. We're just gonna take a tape measure and measure between the floor and this point, and then the floor and over here, and we're gonna make a mark and cut this straight across between those two marks, and that should make our cabinet shelf in there more flat. 58.5.
I just cut my bottom of the template so it's nice and straight with the floor. I can now use a square, line it up at the bottom, and then I have 13 inches marked up top here, so I just have to line up this line with that, and I can draw my line. There is our template.
So to make sure everything is even across the bottom, we measured the 4 different points where we're gonna have our dividers, and we marked them on the wall here at 61 inches from the ground. And so that way we can make our 4 templates end at the same spot. But yeah, now basically we have to do these other middle parts and make sure they come down to where our marks are.
So I just traced up my first template onto our 1/2 inch Baltic birch. Got my circular saw, time to cut it out. So I thought I would explain how I'm making sure I have right angles. To start off with, I'm using the machined edge side of our Baltic birch. Basically the bottom piece of our template that's going to attach to the bottom piece of our cabinet on the machined edge. And then I take my guide for the circular saw and just make sure it's square. So I use my square first. I draw a line, and then I line up this line with that line that I just drew so that this line is nice and square. And then after that, I cut that line up to about where my template ends. This is now square. So I'm just gonna line up my square part of the template right there. And I just kind of use my thumbs as a guide. So I just kind of smash it down onto my thumb here and here. I do it with two hands though, but I'm holding a camera so I can't do that. I then trace my template and then I put blue tape over that. And I set down the template again. I trace over so the trace mark is on my blue tape, which makes a nicer cut. And then I take my circular saw and cut it. These edges technically aren't straight, but you're not gonna see them. So I figured circular saw is easiest. The jigsaw we have is a little wonky, so I just thought this would be better. So yeah, that's how I do it. I'm gonna cut my last template for our cabinets.
So this is our bottom piece for our cabinets, and we have our dado cuts again, which we used for our bed bump out boxes to cut a groove for our strip lights to go into, and so we're about to do the same thing for overhead cabinets. So Nico's marked the middle, and we're gonna line it up.
Left with the groove.
One thing that we are doing with our cabinets is we need to cut our back strips with a slight angle. This is one of our back support beams, which goes in between our dividers. And if you notice here, it has just the bit, it peeks out the edge here, so there's a little bit of an angle. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this bottom edge of this to match the angle of our divider, so that way it can sit more flush with our back wall of the van. So to get this angle, we take our divider piece over to the table saw, and we've already set ours up to the proper angle, but basically you could set the divider against the middle of the saw blade. We did this with the saw blade a bit higher to get a more precise angle. This particular table saw has an adjuster here which angles the blade to the side. You just put your divider on it and then make sure the blade matches up with this side. So you could raise the blade up and then match it along that and then bring it back down to the height you want. And then we will cut. We will run this strip and just cut off the very, very edge of this. Here's our test piece.
Cut a test piece just to make sure it lines up.
This now matches up. You can see the lip doesn't overhang the side of this piece anymore. It's just kind of flat and matches this angle here. So that's how you do that. Hope I explained it well enough.
Maybe start in the middle so it doesn't look like
Square to me so far. One thing to think about when you're making pocket holes is to stagger them a bit. So these two are wider and these two are narrow, so these screws go in right here and here, and these ones fit right there above and below. Always a good idea to clamp whatever you can before screwing it, because screws want to make things wiggle around a lot, and clamps kind of help. So we are getting the curve of our ceiling. That way we know how to cut our face frame for our cabinet. After scribing the curve of our ceiling, we trace that line onto a 1x5 piece of pine. Then we use a jigsaw to cut out that curved edge. So one thing we failed to do when we did our template of the curve of the ceiling is that we didn't have a reference to make sure that line would be parallel with the bottom of our cabinet. Our template could have been slanted this way or this way a bit in the van, because if we put this in the van, this top curve fits the roof of the van pretty well. But this bottom line of this piece of wood might be just like slightly like this way or this way in comparison to the base of the cabinet, which we don't want. So what I'm doing to fix that issue is we just put this in place. Here we lined up this smaller edge with the top and the edge, and then I've marked in pencil on the side here the distance that is. And then I'm gonna take my measuring tape. I'm gonna measure exactly how far up that line is from the bottom of the cabinet, which is 11 and 3/16. I'm gonna mark 11 and 3/16 on each of these. So that way we have a line that runs parallel to the base of this cabinet. Okay, now that I have that line, Nico and I are going to attach this back on here, lined up with that line in the front, so this straight side of the board is lined up with that line. So now everything should be parallel and good. First, what we're gonna do is come here to the back side, and we're gonna mark the tops of each of these, particularly that one there on the end, because one thing that is certain is that each of these should be hitting the top of our ceiling. So we're gonna mark that on the back of this. And then we're gonna take this piece off now, and we're gonna put our template on the back of it and have the top of our template run through each of these lines. Once we finished our curved top piece, we cut a few 1x2s to the proper length for the bottom and sides of our face frame, and then sanded everything. We're gonna put some wood glue on, and then we will clamp both of these pieces down to this flat board and then screw in, so that way we have little movement and we keep things nice and square.
So before we attach this last piece into the face frame, we just wanted to make sure that everything lined up, because this top piece and this bottom piece are a 1/4 inch different, and that's because this baseboard is not straight anymore. It's kind of bent a little bit. It does line up nicely. This piece, and that piece are nice and square. And as you can see over here, this piece isn't square. Our cabinet's not square. So what we're just gonna do is make this piece not square, and we're gonna bend it out just to match this line. Boom, looks square.
Looks good. Isn't square. The rest is though. Then Nico added some pocket holes to the cabinet carcass for attaching the face frame. We added wood glue and then clamped and screwed that frame into place. Okay, we have our face frame attached. Just a couple of screws are spinning. We don't really know why, but for the most part, they're mostly attached and there's glue. And we will let it dry overnight. But first we're gonna do a little dry fit in the van just to make sure everything's still lining up pretty good. All right, today we are beginning our second upper cabinet that goes over the passenger side of the van. We have our templates that we used for the driver's side, and we're just gonna see if any of those kind of match the curvature of the ceiling and the shape we want. And we're gonna get started on the process all over again.
Since nothing's level in our van, we're just using our bed bump out box as a reference line so everything looks level. Right here we're going to do about 13-inch deep cabinets, and then over here for the clothing cabinets we're going to do about 15.5. So this side will be a bit deeper, taller I guess, and this will be shorter.
And that's just so when we're in the kitchen we don't bump our heads on our cabinets. In the bed our heads will be on that side, and there'll be plenty of room for our feet anyways. Now we have two lines on here. This one is where our kitchen cupboards will end, and then this one is where our bedroom cabinets will end. And we can erase the rest of this line from like here on over.
So for the closet side of our cabinet, which is 2.5 inches taller, I just cut these pieces all the same. However, our ceiling kind of curves slightly down, so we're gonna have to cut off maybe like a 1/16 or an 1/8 off the bottom of, I think, 2 of them. So we're gonna do that right now. Okay, like I said, we have 3 of these exact same pieces. So basically we're just lining up this line and marking it on our divider.
Okay, something we have just discovered. This is our shared divider piece between the shorter cabinet and the longer cabinet. Both of these two bottom pieces right now are the exact same depth. However, right now it lines up with the width of the bottom of this. But as you know, with the van walls and everything, this gets more narrow as it comes up. So once this goes down to this line, we line up with that line, you can see there's about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch here that's missing. What we're gonna do, since this piece will be lining up with this and we want everything in the front to be flush with each other, is we are going to just cut off this difference from this piece, and same thing with this piece that's gonna sit actually on top of this on the edge. We'll have to cut off that amount so everything is to the exact width of this part of this board where everything sits.
It's pretty good to me.
Okay, so we're cutting off that much. So here's how the cabinet will look. Here's this shorter side of this cabinet, and then over here it lines up there, and then this is where our cabinets get deeper, and then our next base will sit on the bottom of this, like so.
Good morning, it is a new day. Today we have pretty much all our pieces for our second upper cabinet. So we're gonna start assembling that. What's left to do, apart from the assembly, we do have to cut these strips from this one and this board. These are both 1/2-inch Baltic birch. This is what we're gonna use as our drilling points to go into the van through the cabinets to make it nice and secure. Maddie is putting some pocket holes in to all our boards so we can get those together. Now it's time to start gluing and screwing our cabinets together. We do have a right angle clamp. Unfortunately, we only have one of these, but we made it work with the last cabinet, so.
Probably gonna do that, and then also just clamp, just one of these long clamps over the top, so that way there's no play in the back of it. So what we're doing now is putting the cabinets on the ground, front side face down. This is the back side of our cabinets that are going up against the wall that's facing upwards here. And that is just so we can line it up without having to support this bottom side 3 inches. That door's lining up with that line, and then we will glue and attach it to this cabinet. Here's what we did. We ended up using 2 clamps together to make it long enough to clamp this whole thing. The 2 different levels. This is the bottom of our cabinets here, and this one over the kitchen is just a little bit higher, whereas these ones over the bed are going to be a little bit deeper. So we're going to let it dry, and then we'll figure out how to make a face frame for this guy probably tomorrow. Okay, so we're gonna make a scribe on this board of our ceiling curve. I have a pencil with a block on it, and we are going to put this board just up here and then cut it. Okay, one thing that we struggled with last time we built face frames, and that's still a struggle with this one, is that when you are creating the template and you're getting the curvature of the ceiling, it's pretty much impossible to know when you're holding the board up in the van if everything is going to be parallel and square to the cabinet. So I'll show you what I mean by that. So here we have the face frame on the top of our cabinet, like so, and we've measured from the ground up to figure out pretty much where it needs to be in order for these cabinets to be square and for this face frame to be parallel with the base of the cabinet. The problem is that in order for everything to be square and even, is that I had to lift this side up a bit. So this corner is higher than this part, which is going to be a problem in the van because the ceiling will rest on this corner here. So this is too high. By measuring up on the sides here like we did with the other cabinet and marking a spot, I've been able to bring this up to where it's now parallel, and I made a mark here on the back of this face frame board. And then we will get a template on cardboard of the roof shape in the van, and we will put it on the back of this template, and I will make sure that I line up this side with this line that I drew, and then this other side will line up with the top of this board. All right, so cardboard was a huge fail. It doesn't get an accurate template at all. We just wasted a piece of wood. Anyways, we have these slats that are left over from our ceiling, and so we're gonna hold this up sideways and use this to make a template on. It's still a lot more rigid than cardboard. Once we have a template on that, that'll be much more accurate. All right, so we've got the top part of our face frame pretty much close enough. I think it's about 1/8 of an inch of difference between one side and the other to make it square. And we decided 1/8 of an inch is not visibly noticeable, and we're gonna cover the face frame with cabinet doors anyways. Rather than do 1/8 of an inch taper cut, we're gonna leave it as is, and we're starting on building the rest of the face frame. Okay, Nico, what did we do wrong?
Everything. So when we line up these top corners so that this piece is going to be flush onto our ceiling, it brings this all out of whack. So there's this, basically we made the cabinet frame square and this is not square.
Carcass is just slightly not good. Or maybe it could be like this bottom piece is bowed a little bit. Since we made all 3 of these the same length at 13 inches, where it needs to be a little bit longer, at least on this piece. Unfortunately, our glue's all dried. We glued and screwed it all together. We're thinking we might just undo the screws on this piece and kind of like cut it out of here, hoping to preserve the rest of the frame, and then put a longer piece in there. And that would fix our problem. So that way this part can come down all the way to this corner here. This means this would not be square anymore, but that's fine because it's gonna be hidden behind a cabinet door anyways. The rest of it looks pretty good otherwise, but yeah, if we line this up down here, if we line this corner up down here, there's a lip underneath just this one, and then also a gap here at the top. We just got a little 1/4 inch spacer, so we only undid the glue and screws on this one side, so it adds less squareness to the face frame, but we figure it's not going to be visibly that much of a difference. And obviously we will wood fill and sand that because that looks ugly. Hello from the future. It's been a while since we've come out with a new video, but we are excited to finally get some of our cabinet videos up. This was a long one, so if you've stuck through to this point, thank you so much for being here. We hope this video really helps you out. We did have a lot of struggles along the way. So in this Lessons Learned, we're gonna go a little more in depth on some of those struggles, how to avoid them if we know, and how you could do this better.
So to start us off, our first lesson is going to be when you buy your Baltic birch or whatever plywood you're going to use. I recommend Baltic birch. It's nice and strong. It's got about 9 plies, so it's very strong and resistant to warp, but not that resistant. So our tip is to buy your plywood and then immediately build your cabinet. We bought our plywood and it kind of sat in the garage for a little bit, and it ended up warping just a little bit, as you could tell from the video. And I think if we built the cabinets right away, it would be held in place and wouldn't warp at all.
And if our cabinets didn't warp as much, then our face frames could be square, and square makes everything easier. Our second lesson is to scribe the bottom edge of your cabinet so it matches the wall. So the base piece of the cabinet we just kept as a rectangle. However, the van curves lengthwise as well as height-wise, I guess you could say. So it's fine. we just have, I'll show you in a little video clip, we just have a bit of our cabinet sticking out from the wall, especially on the driver's side cabinet, because that bottom piece is really long. In most vans that you build, the dividers for your upper cabinets will be about the same dimensions. The reason that they are so different in our van is because our walls are extra curvy. And the reason for that is because we use thin materials for our walls and our ceiling. If we use a thicker material, it wouldn't have maintained so much the natural curve of the van. We would have had flatter pieces of walls, if that makes sense. A more rigid piece of wall is not going to curve as much, and with that, we would have been able to have our dividers more uniform in size and shape. It'll just depend on how you did your walls. This really probably should have been a lessons learned for our walls video, but lighter materials are great for keeping the weight of your van down, but also might make it harder for other steps down the line.
Another lesson that we learned on our second cabinet that we built was that the base pieces can't be the same size. And if you watched our video fully, you know that our second cabinet we built are two different heights. The reason for this is because as the van from top to bottom, it goes narrow and then it gets wider. So when you have your base piece that's here, it's going to be a different size than something 2 inches down. So I think it was about 1/8 that we cut off our base. That if we planned ahead and thought about this, we wouldn't have to do as much work.
One of the other main struggles that we had with our upper cabinets was getting that top piece of the face frame scribed while also keeping it square with the rest of the face frame. We don't really have the best solution for this other than getting a piece of wood that's definitely bigger than what you need for that top piece. Then you can either do like what we did on our first cabinet and retrace your scribed edge once you figure out what's square, or instead of doing that, you could just cut a tapered cut between those two marks so your straight side is cut that way and you don't have to recut with a jigsaw twice. This would maybe save a little bit of time. If anyone has a better solution to this instead of cutting the same piece of wood multiple times, let us know in the comments.
One lesson learned, which isn't really a lesson learned, it was more of a material used. When we're building the cabinets and aligning the dividers on the base, we used a square clamp. If we had more of those, that would have been great, because we used a bunch of long clamps to make things work, which worked in the end, but if we had 3 or 4 of those square clamps, it would have been way easier. If you're still here, thank you very much. You must be building cabinets and you must be struggling. They're very hard. I want to reiterate that we are not cabinet builders. We're not really woodworkers.
Van builders.
And we're not really van builders, but we did do this and we've been living in this thing for over a year now. And everything has worked great. So if we can do it, you can do it.
Stay tuned for our part 2 of our cabinet build video. In that one, we will be painting our cabinets, we will be making the doors for the cabinets, and we'll be installing them in our van. So we'll see you next time.